That's all right. So now I've started recording. So hi everyone. Welcome to our very first Starknet Malaysia guest speaker talk. And I'm Chi Chuan, and I'm one of the organizers for Starknet Malaysia committee. And today we are very proud and to invite over Gary. And Gary is the creator of Vyro. So what's Vyro, you may ask? So we have heard of this thing called WAP. WAP is by the Nethermind team. It converts the Solidity code to Cairo code, so you can write stuff in Solidity and it will transpile your code to Cairo. So that helps to onboard like devs to Cairo. And we have now the Viper version, and it's created by Gary. And I will leave the further introduction to Vyro to Gary. But yeah, take us away, Gary.
Thanks, Chi Chuan. So hi everybody, I'm Gary, and today I'll be speaking about Vyro, which is a project that I've been working on. First off, I want to thank Chi Chuan and Wen Kang for organizing this and inviting me to share about my project. And before that, I'll just give a quick introduction about myself. At the end of last year, I was looking to get into Web3 dev after a few years of dabbling around. Yeah, correct. That's the GitHub link. Yeah, so back to December last year, I was looking to get into Web3 dev, and I was applying for internships. And first, I got to spend the first half of this year with Nethermind, working on the WAP transpiler, which, as Chi Chuan mentioned, converts your Solidity code into Cairo code. And that's where I got to learn a lot about transpilers and how the entire process works, which was really pretty cool stuff that they're doing. I don't know if you have seen it, but they can now transpile the entire Uniswap contract onto Starknet. That was the latest update that I saw. And at the same time, at around December last year as well, I started contributing to the Viper project. So Viper, it's an alternative to Solidity. And in this presentation, I'll be introducing a bit more about Viper actually, because I will assume that most of the people here would be familiar with Cairo, since this is a Starknet ecosystem sharing session. So yeah, let's jump in. So first, what is Vyro? It is a command line interface that converts your Viper smart contracts into Cairo code that can be deployed onto Starknet. And as mentioned, the inspiration for this is from the WAP team at Nethermind. So I'm going to give a very quick intro to Viper, just by comparing it to Solidity. And if most of you are familiar with Solidity, I would characterize it as a language that is very flexible. It allows you to do many things without limiting your ability to, for example, go into assembly, and you could have a while loop, you could have a for loop. And Viper, on the other hand, is very opinionated about what you can or cannot do. And it intentionally limits what the developer can do, so that it is safer, or rather it is easier to ensure safety in the code itself when compiling it. So I really like this meme about a for loop in Solidity, where you have countless ways of doing it, and it has different implications on gas costs. So if you would want to do a for loop in Viper, it would be really similar to the Python syntax, which is this snippet over here. So personally, I like the Viper syntax a lot more than Solidity. It's just a lot easier to read and to learn personally, although the resources are a lot less limited in comparison. And I think another defining feature of Viper is that there's no contract inheritance like what you have in Solidity. And in this sense, it's really quite similar to what we have in Cairo now, where imports they are still quite limited. You can't have inheritance, although you are able to import certain functions or constants now from another file. So this is just a quick FYI on who used or are still using Vyper. We have Uniswap v1, which is in Vyper, Yen v1 as well. And in Yen v3, they have a new governance module that is implemented in Vyper. We also have Lido, but it's used a lot less than Solidity in a code base. We have the ETH2 deposit contract, the first version. It was in Vyper, but then it got scrapped and was re-implemented in Solidity. And lastly, of course, we have Curve Finance, where majority of their smart contracts are written in Vyper. Last but not least, if any of you were catching DEF CON and were watching the opening ceremony, you might have noticed that Vitalik himself shared a code snippet that is in Vyper. And you may not know this, but Vyper originally grew from another project called Serpent, which Vitalik himself created. Yeah, but that's a whole lot of history that I myself are not fully familiar with. But if you check out the commits, you will see it. So there's a question in the chat box. Does that mean that a Vyper function call uses or creates less bytecode? I would say that in general, Vyper is more efficient, and therefore it does create less bytecode. And the reason this is the case is because the things that you can do with Vyper are more limited than in Solidity. And because of this limitation, it is easier to reason about the operations that need to occur to execute the intended operation. So in most cases, Vyper is actually more efficient than Solidity. Yeah. So, but I mean, of course, I'm comparing against pure Solidity, not someone who drops into assembly or U+ in Solidity. Yeah, because once you do that, then if you are a good optimizer, I'm pretty sure you can be on par or even beat Vyper easily. And now I'll share about the compilation process for languages in general. So on the left, what usually happens in a compilation process is we take the readable code that we are writing, we convert it into a tree data structure that's called an abstract syntax tree. And then this is converted into a intermediate representation. And then this is eventually transformed into bytecode or assembly. This is the general compilation process. And if we look at EVM languages, this is how they compare. So we have Solidity and Rust. They both compile to an intermediate IR that's called U, which then gets converted into EVM bytecode. And then on the right, we have Vyper, which has its own AST, and that gets converted into its own IR, which is called LLL or Lisp-like language. And then this is converted to EVM bytecode. And then lastly, we have Huff, which is a newer language and very low level. So based on what I understand, they drop from the AST to bytecode directly. And the reason they can do so is because Huff is already really low level. So having an IR kind of defeats the purpose. And with this in mind, let's see how we can work with the Vyper language to convert it into Cairo. So first off, we are primarily working with the Viper AST that's generated by the Viper compiler itself. And Viro takes this AST and it adds on a few more information that is specific to Cairo. And the way to do so is by changing the structure of the AST tree, either by modifying existing information or adding new nodes to handle Cairo specific things. So one example of a Cairo specific instruction would be, let me just take a quick look. Yeah, so reading and writing to storage in Cairo is very different from EVM. It requires a specific operation. So the storage variable name dot read or storage variable dot write. So that was something that was a class of AST nodes that were created just to handle this special syntax in Cairo. And another example, it's the Cairo assert, which actually functions as an assignment as well. So that was something that we had to take note of in order to properly convert Viper code into Cairo code. And after this transformation of the AST is done, then the last step is really simple. We are printing the AST that has been modified and outputting the Cairo equivalent for each node. And right now in the Cairo compilation process, it drops directly from AST into assembly. But I think in 1.0, there will be a new IR that will be introduced that's called Sierra. But the point of this diagram is really to show everyone what the transpilation process is. And Viro actually only touches the Viper AST and outputs it to Cairo code. And then this Cairo code goes through its own compilation process with the Cairo compiler. And Viro itself does not do anything for this portion. So let's run through a very simple toy contract. On the left, I have a Viper contract that is an external view function, and it does two operations. First, you take the input and you modulo it by 2, and you add it to the other input. And if we go back, right, the first step is to convert it into the Viper AST. So let's see what it looks like. I've extracted the important AST nodes so that it is easier for this session. In the full Viper AST, you'll see a few more nodes that are not present here. So in case anyone is going to look at it after this session. And let me just give a quick run through of how this contract corresponds to this AST tree. So first you have the entire contract, which is contained in a module node. And then we have a function def, which stands for function definition and refers to this function at mul in 128. So if you have multiple functions, then there would be multiple function def nodes under the module node. And right now, under this function that we have, there is only one statement, which is a return statement. So here we can see that return is a child node of the function def node. And then within return, it has one value, which is a binop or binary operation. And within the binary operation itself, it has two operands. One is the variable a or the argument a. And then the other argument is another binop node, which then operates on another two operands. Sorry, there's a typo here. This should be b. And basically what this means is this part is B modulo 2. And then this section, we are adding A to the result of B modulo 2. And then we are returning this result for this function. And this function constitutes the entire contract. Right. Then let's move on to how the Viro transpiler that then operates on this Viper AST. First, we break up the return value and we move it into a assignment. So what we are saying is we assign the value of the return statement to a new temporary variable that we'll create. Let's just call it temp2. And temp2 is basically A plus B modulo 2. And then the next step is to replace the return value with the new temporary variable that we have created. So right now we would have temp2 as the return value here. And then for the assigned node that we have created, it would be temp2. Let me see if I can annotate. Yeah, so for this assigned node, we would have temp2 equals A plus B modulo 2. And then again, right now when we are running through this operation, we will break up the assigned statement, temp2 equals A plus B modulo 2, into two separate statements. So here we are shifting the second part of this assigned statement, which has a nested operation, into its own statement. So we move this one level up, and then we create another temporary variable called temp1. And we assign the value to be B modulo 2. And then what would happen in the tree is we would replace this by temp1. And this would complete the transpilation process. So let me fix a typo here. Oops. Okay, so there's a question in the chat. Yeah, so Justin, you're correct. We are trying to abstract away the operations into individual statements. And the reason that we need to do so is because we want to, so firstly, before Cairo 0.10, you couldn't chain operations. So some operations like B modulo 2, they are not native to Cairo, and you need to wrap them in a function call. So because of this, it would be necessary to break up any nested binary operations into its own statement. And in terms of a transpiler, it makes sense to do so because you want to reduce the code paths as much as possible. So in this case, what I mean by that is if we have an operation in the return statement, then our compiler would need to handle return statements or return nodes in addition to assign nodes. But if we abstract away all return values and we move them into a assign node using a temporary variable, then what this means for our transpiler is we only need one code path that handles assign nodes instead of both assign and return. And in some sense, this is what guides the entire transpiler, which is to funnel as much logic or code path as possible into as few nodes as you possibly could. Does that mean the node server will require a larger memory bank in exchange for handling less operations. If I understood the question correctly, the answer will be yes. But in this case, the node server refers to the compiler, which is running on your local machine. So, sorry, the transpiler, which is running on your local machine. So that wouldn't really be a limitation, in my opinion. Cool, let's move on. And right now we have reached the final step, which is to convert our viral AST into Cairo. And I've broken it down into the specific sections, or rather how each node corresponds to the code that's generated. Firstly, we have the module node, which contains information like the imports and also the language modifier that is typically at the top of StuckNet programs. And then we have a function dev node that prints the equivalent Cairo code. It takes the same function name and then provides the implicit arguments. And right now, the implicit arguments are built in the sense that the transpiler is not checking which built-ins are actually required, but it is just giving you all the built-ins. So maybe that's something that could be improved, but I don't really prioritize that because typically we would need most or all three built-ins. And then we have the arguments, which are also under the function dev node. And in this case, we have converted the type from int 128 into felt. And as well as the return value, the type is now felt. And the slight modification is Cairo requires return values to have a variable name before 0.10. So what the transpiler does is it appends underscore ret to the function name. And this is used as the return variable name. So if you can see it, this would break if it's a tuple value, but I don't think Viral right now handles tuple values. So that would be a feature to build for the future. But yeah, in my head, the solution will be quite trivial. We will just count the number of return values and then add a number to underscore ret. And I think that would solve it. Yeah, but let's leave it for the future. Let's go into the body of the function dev node. So in the transpile AST, we have 3 nodes, 2 assign statements and 1 return statement. And the Cairo code for these statements are pretty easy. So let is hard coded because it's a Cairo syntax. And then we just print the name of the variable that is being assigned. And then we print the value of that variable on the right side. So just printing the name on the left and printing the value on the right. And next we have the second statement, which is let. Again, the same thing, just a variable name, which is, so both of these are temporary variables, and which is why you see this syntax of viral underscore var underscore a certain number. And then again, the value is on the right side. And lastly, we have the return statement, which returns the variable that was assigned in the previous node. And just a side track, modulo is replaced by a function call that is part of a library that's provided in Viral. The reason for this is I don't think modulo is supported operand in Cairo, which is why we have to create this wrapper function to properly transpile Viper code into Cairo. So yeah, that wraps up the quick and simple Viper example. And what is next for Viro? There are quite a few more features that could be supported. And the first one is, of course, supporting all the types, or as many of them as possible. And the two most pressing ones would be static arrays and dynamic arrays. We also want to support as many of Viper's built-in functions as far as possible. But again, these two are subject to the fundamental differences between StuckNet and the EVM. For example, StuckNet does not have a decimal type, whereas Viper has. So this probably could never be supported on StuckNet. And some of Viper's built-in functions also rely on pre-compiles on Ethereum. And I think there are also hashing functions that would not be able, that we would not be able to transpile to StuckNet. So yeah, this is all on a best case, best efforts basis. And then the last two would be the ability to transform for loops into Cairo. And this will probably require some form of recursion. And then the last one will be optimizing the code that is generated. So if you transpile a more complex contract in Viper to Cairo, you will notice that there are some statements that are redundant. So let me try to write an example. So because the compiler, the transpiler, it reduces everything to the common case, right? Like what I mentioned earlier, we move everything into a assign statement, and then we let a single code path handle all the logic. So in some cases, it could lead to something ridiculous like this. Okay, this is very slow. I'm going to type it. So first we have a assignment. Let's say this is felt with a value 1. And then the next line, we assign another temporary variable to the same value before that. And then again, we perform another assignment of the same variable. Sorry, actually this is not that good an example. Let's use a return statement instead. So if you look at this string of statements, you will immediately notice that this is entirely redundant, right? Because we are returning Viro var2, but it is just a copy of Viro var1. So why don't we just return Viro var1 instead? And this is what an optimization pass would do, which is to eliminate this kind of statements. And this is pretty common in compilers as well. The usual compilers outside of blockchain. So let's say your, I don't know, C++ compiler, etc. They all have passes in the LLVM to do this kind of things. So yeah, here what we want is to delete this and just return Viro var1. Yeah, so this is the quick example of what an optimization pass would do. Okay, let's delete this. Oh, cool. That's the end of my presentation. And I've actually shared some resources for Viper if anyone is interested. But again, as I mentioned, my assumption was most of the people here would be familiar with Cairo. But yeah, there are plenty of resources on Cairo actually. And I would say they are even more available than Viper, which is kind of sad for me, but yeah, it's a much bigger ecosystem. So you shouldn't have any trouble finding Cairo resources. Yeah, so with that, I will end my sharing. Yeah, I'll pass the time back to Xuan and Wenpeng.
Thank you very much, Gary, for the amazing talk. So right now we'll go into our Q&A session. And to start things off, I'll just ask Gary, what got you into Ethereum? How do you get to know about Ethereum and Web3, and what got you interested in it?
Yep. I think I had a pretty similar journey to any non-dev. I was sucked into the ICO boom in 2017. And shortly after that, I started working as a lawyer for a while. And at my law firm, I was heavily involved in financial regulations. So I had to deal a lot with clients that were in crypto or the first wave of crypto. And if you follow regulations, you will notice that regulations are incredibly slow to react to technology, and rightfully so, because legislation shouldn't front run tech developments. It cannot foresee what's going to happen. But as someone who got increasingly interested with the tech, it became very frustrating. So that's when I started to do and learn stuff on my own to eventually get to the technical side or the dev side. And yeah, the past 3 to 4 years is basically a slow journey into where I am today. So I finally took the plunge last December, did some internships with Nethermind, etc. And then now I'm working full-time in crypto. And my day job is building a new synthetics protocol on Starknet. Yeah, that's my journey over the past 5 years.
That sounds very exciting. I imagine it's a very big career change from a lawyer to a developer.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so everyone, feel free to put your question in the chat as usual. So right now, a question from the chat is, how's the roadmap like for Viral?
Well, there isn't really a roadmap. So if you are interested in contributing, you can just reach out to me on Twitter or Telegram, and then we can talk about it. So this is a side project for me. And I consider myself a young programmer. So I'm also learning a lot of things on the way. So don't feel intimidated or anything, because yeah, we all start out that way.
Nice. So one question that I personally have is, so with the the upcoming roadmap for Ethereum, the idea of EWASM, what's your thought on EWASM? As it's meant to be, so to say, the thing that will enable people to write in the language that they want and have it work on EVM by transpiling it to EWASM. So what's your thought on it, and how do you think it will maybe relate to Viral as a project?
Honestly, I'm not familiar with EWASM, but I do know that this endeavor has been going on for quite a few years, maybe on and off. So I don't think even if it pulls through, that it will replace the position of Solidity and Viper. Because if you look at, if I want to find something on Solidity, any resources, there are so many of them now, and it's really difficult to overcome this first comer advantage. And yeah, so even for other languages or smart contract based languages, I think it's really difficult to gain traction. But yeah, the caveat is I don't know much about eWASM, so we can't really answer your question well.
I see. But yeah, it does make sense that a lot, I mean, since we are so used to using Solidity and Viro, it's very unlikely that a lot of people that are already familiar with it will just suddenly give up on it. Yeah, I do agree on that as well. So how does the Champarler work for uint256? So how does, when transpiling, how do you deal with the uint256 type, especially for Cairo, since for Cairo it's a library you have to import? So how do you convert that from Viper to Cairo?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the technical answer is whenever there's a uint256, we wrap it in a function call, because in Cairo, the way you define a uint256 is this almost like a function call. Basically you do, I'm just going to type somewhere here. In Cairo, for uint256, you would do something like this. Low equals, I don't know, 1, high equals 0 maybe. And if we think about it from the Viper AST point of view, this is actually a function call with a optional argument or quark low and another quark high. And what this means is when we transpile it, in Viper, this would be something like x uint256 equals 1. Yeah, so this would be the equivalent code that you would see that is transpiled. And uint256, they introduce a lot of friction actually, because when you perform any arithmetic operations, add, subtract, division, or multiplication, you need a custom library to handle all this. Sorry, not a custom library. I think Stuxnet has built-in functions, but what Viro does is it uses a built-in library. Sorry, not a built-in library. I created a new library to handle uint256 operations, but it's in substance very similar to what the warp team did, which is to handle uint256 operations with their own Cairo functions. And I think that's the most elegant way of doing it. You cannot replicate EVM semantics directly in Cairo simply because of the difference in the base data type, which is felt, and it has up to 251 bits or 252 bits. I think 251 bits. Whereas in EVM, the base data type is 256 bits. Yeah.
Got it. So some questions for the comment section. So what's your top 3 learning tips for a non-dev who wants to start coding?
Yeah, that's something I still ask myself actually when I'm picking up something new. And I actually only have one tip, which is to work on your own projects or work on or contribute to another project. I think that's the most impactful thing that you can do for your learning. which is why I keep trying to build stuff on my own, because it really forces you to use what you've learned in a way that is practical. When I started learning coding, I was doing all these courses online, but once the course ended, I didn't know what to do, and eventually those knowledge that I had became rusty. So if you can find something that you're interested to work on the side, that'll be really helpful to your learning. And just keep finding small things that you can add on to improve, etc. Yeah, I think that would really help a lot.
Thanks for the amazing advice. Zhi Kang asks, are you only using Viro when working on your synthetic project on Starknet, or you still need to understand other languages too?
Right. So for my day job, I'm using Cairo mainly for the smart contracts, and then the development framework, we are using just Python, pure Python without any external packages for now. So yeah, I don't use Viro at all for my day job. Also because there are no Viper smart contracts involved. But even if there was, I wouldn't use a transpiler for a production project. And the reason is transpilers are good for learning, but the code is not very readable. And if you're working on a project with multiple people, you want to build a code for maintainability so that other people can understand and new joiners can understand. So in that sense, I don't think a transpiler is fit for most production use, especially if your project that's building. But it is very useful for understanding the semantics if you're coming from a different language, or if you just want to get something up quick and fast. Yeah, that's my view on, or my view on at least WAP and Viro.
So to extend on the previous question, like your answer on transpiler a bit. So something like TypeScript, it's essentially a transpiler to JavaScript, and it's one of the, I would say, more production ready transpiler. Do you think that WAP or Viper would one day have such a use when it goes stable? Or would it, in your opinion, would it always just be a very good entry point?
I think it's a bit different because TypeScript, it introduces its own syntax. So in that sense, it's actually closer to a compiler than a transpiler. So for example, I think there are, so in comparison to JavaScript, I think TypeScript enforces you to define the type of each variable, right? And it actually does runtime checks. Sorry, not runtime checks, compile time checks on these definitions. So if you declare something of this type and it's wrong, if I'm not wrong, TypeScript will throw an error when you try to compile it. So in that sense, TypeScript is actually more of an entirely new language that is built off JavaScript and is closer to a compiler. So it's quite different from a transpiler actually.
Got it. So one question that I also have is that does WAP handle implicit argument like Viro? If so, what is their strategy as compared to Viro?
I think WAP is more intelligent about the implicits actually, but I can't confirm that because I didn't manage to look into that while I was working on it. Yeah, but I don't think there is a cost to just including the built-ins, because if you don't use them, the pointer it remains the same. Yeah, I might be wrong on that though.
Justin has a question. So was there an interest to make Viro more production ready? Yes.
I'm not really sure what the question means by coding Viro on a lower level language, because the limitation is not on the machine running the transponder. So yeah, it's not a limitation of speed or memory.
So how about like any interest of making Viro production ready, or do you think it's, I mean, I think you answered this already, but yeah.
Yeah, I think probably not, unless there's some organization that's willing to take on this effort, because you will need it to be formally verified and everything. Yeah, because production ready in crypto means a really high standard. And I think WAP themselves are undergoing formal verification, or maybe it's completed. I can't remember. Yeah, but as a side project, I can never give that level of guarantee for sure. Yeah.
Thank you for the answer. Yeah, open source project, it's not easy to maintain them, especially if you are alone or if you don't have a team. Yeah, a lot of the current open source project right now does have like quite a big team. If you look into like more production ready ones like Babel, or I mean, what else? Yeah, actually a lot of framework as well is usually maintained by an organization, be it non-profit or big companies like Google. So everyone who is interested in the project, or like,
Yeah.
please do contact Gary to help. Even not to production level ready, but make this project something that's even more amazing that it's in the early phase. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, do check out Viper.
Yeah.
If you
Do
have
check out Viper. Yeah, guys,
No.
do check out. If you're interested in contribute to, yeah, do contact us. So one question that I have is, so right now, Cairo is constantly having a change of syntax, especially with Cairo 1.0 coming up.
Yep.
As well. So do you have any strategy that you employ in order to adapt quickly to this very rapid change?
Not really, actually. So there are some blockers. The first one is that Viro uses Ape framework for its testing. So whenever there's a upgrade in Cairo and Stuxnet, then we would need to wait for Ape framework to update their plugins before we can perform that update to the new version. And in terms of the Cairo syntax itself, you can't really prepare for it, because they could introduce breaking changes, especially with 1.0 coming out. And yeah, you would just have to adapt the transponder when that happens. So there are some things that are very easy. So when we move from Cairo 0.9 to 0.10, Cairo introduced curly brackets. And there were some changes in the syntax, like you don't need to use the keyword and to terminate a if condition or error message. So this kind of syntax changes are very easy, because we are just changing the module that prints Cairo code from the modified AST. And a lot of this printing is actually hard coded. Like the curly brackets are hard coded. Right? It's just where you place them in the code. And analogy is the let keyword in every assignment. That's hard coded. So this kind of syntax changes are easy to handle. But then you have more difficult changes that, for example, introduces a new keyword. So for example, 0.10 allows you to chain conditions together using AND. So that wasn't possible before, and yeah, it's something that would require more work to support this kind of stuff.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that Cairo change in syntax. Actually, from what I know, the 0.9 to 0.10 change causes a lot of things to break. And I think a few weeks before this, I tried on a bit on WAP, and the syntax is actually still on 0.9 as well. Not
Right.
sure if they updated it. So yeah, like syntax changes are always a pain to deal with, I think, for a lot of people, I guess.
Yeah, it's unavoidable
Mm,
because we are early on Stucknet.
true. It's a good thing, right? We are early, but at the same time, it's exciting, but changes are a lot more radical.
Yeah, definitely.
So Justin asks, what's the biggest challenge facing Viral right now?
There are actually multiple challenges. So the first one is so few people know Viper that I don't even know if anyone has tried using Viral just to transport anything other than me.
I also tried. Yeah, it's working.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, so but definitely not as many people know about Viper as compared to Solidity. So that's one challenge. The second one is just the effort that may be needed to maintain it and also to support the features that we want to support. Primarily because, yeah, this is just a side project that myself and maybe a few others contribute to in their free time. So, yeah, I would say those two are the biggest challenges I can think of. But thankfully, one thing that I should point out is the Viper language and the Viper compiler is a lot simpler than Solidity. So because of this, it is easier to work on Viral if you have a good understanding of Viper's code base. But of course, then again, it goes back to the same question, right? Which is not enough people know about Viper itself. But if anyone is interested, just try taking a look at Solidity compiler repo and Viper's compiler repo. Yeah, it should be. I personally find that the Viper one is a lot easier to navigate and to understand as compared to Solidity.
Interesting. I should probably also check it out. Yeah. Any more questions from the audience? If there's no more questions, then I think I'll pass it back to Qichan.
Yay! Thanks, Wen Kang, for the nice Q&A session, and of course, thanks, Gary. I personally think that this is a very DEF CON worthy talk. So thank you again. It's very nice, very nice. I think all of our audience enjoyed. And yeah, glad to see you. Everyone is here. We do have a couple of sorry, I got my tongue. We do have a couple of workshops coming up soon. The closest one is happening this Saturday, actually. In somewhere in Petaling Jaya. It's going to be in real life. We have a ZK. We are kickstarting our ZK study group. So for those who are interested in joining us this Saturday, in real life, feel free to just DM me personally, or wherever you can find me. You can feel free to DM me, and I'll give you more info on that. And next week, if KL Group will have like a DEF CON watch party, it's going to be on Wednesday at 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. It's going to be at AWS office in Mid Valley. So you may also want to check that out. And all events are free. And yeah, we are still planning on the next in real life Stucknet Malaysia meetup. So if you have any idea, feel free to share. That is going to probably be next month. Considering that we have a very jam-packed month already for this month. So that's all from me, and I want to thank Gary again. And yeah, that's all we have, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.
Cool. Thanks everyone for coming. Yeah, and thanks again.
Thanks
everyone.
Bye-bye. So I'll stop recording, but I'll still be here for any questions and other stuff.